All right, Julie, thank you so much. Conservative Republicans trying to get a balanced budget amendment inserted into the debt deal being worked on by Congress and the White House. The move may not have much traction as negotiators need to work things out in fewer than 30 days. All right, let's talk about it. Republican political strategist Jim Innocenzi joins us as always. Peter's away this week. We are pleased to welcome back Margie Omero, a Democratic pollster and founder of Momentum Analysis. Margie, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Jim, always a pleasure.
Likewise.
Let's talk about the latest in the debt talks that continue. More meetings today at the White House. Yesterday, we heard from Mitch McConnell and his plan that he is coming up with. Jim, let me ask you first of all. Who does this put in a tough situation here? It seems like it puts a lot of pressure on the president to come up with an actual plan, to put something in writing. But does it work? Is this the kind of plan that you think can work?
I don't think so, because I think I don't think it'll ever pass the House of Representatives. I mean, first of all, it's probably way too complicated for most people to comprehend, and it's probably a little too cute by half, is what they used to always say. So I really don't know. And like you said, the president could sit down and say, okay, these are the cuts I want, and the Congress says, no, we don't want to do these cuts. So I think it's really it's getting panned on the Republican side. I think what it does do is it allows Mitch McConnell to say, look, the Senate has a proposal. It's a fallback proposal. I don't think anybody seriously wants to do this, but we have a proposal so that when we get to August 2nd, we don't default on anything. And so it throws the ball back in the president's court.
Does this just basically give Republicans a chance to say, hey, we tried something, we put something out there?
Well, if it did, then you'd see more Republicans on board. But instead, you see them fighting amongst themselves about it. I mean, there's a few things that are difficult about this. So the first is it's making it seem, the president's aware that he is the leader and he's the president of the country, right? But Republicans act as if there was a mandate for them to go to Congress and say, not my problem. I mean, that's the actual language that they're using. So this just codifies that language, which is not what the American people wanted. They wanted someone to change Congress and change Washington, not just throw up their hands and say, we give up. I mean, that's the first issue. The second issue is they're missing a really big opportunity to have a grand deal and really come to the table with the president by storming out and digging their feet in.
Everybody's kind of in a tough situation here, but where does the president fall when it comes to this? How much pressure does it put on him? Now, if he's to the point where he has to say, look, Social Security benefits could be cut, everything has to be done in the next 3 weeks.
Well, look, I think the president wants to see debt ceiling raised so the economy doesn't go off the cliff, and so 80 million checks can go out to Americans, to people who need them. Republicans have been in this kind of fantasy land, some of them, where they feel that default doesn't really matter. And so this shows the Republicans are on different sides of that particular point. Some of them feel it matters, some of them feel it doesn't matter. So at least, we've moved a little bit the ball in that regard. And I think the president is willing to come to the table and discuss a variety of things. The one thing that he was insistent on, which is where the American people agree, is we shouldn't hold the whole entire world's economy hostage for things like corporate jet tax breaks. Jim,
you're biting your tongue. Is it all right? Do you need a Band-Aid?
Yeah, I don't know. Fantasy land. The president's in fantasy land right now, unfortunately. I mean, the compromise that they talked about the other day, you know how big the tax cuts were? You know how big the cuts were? $2 billion. $2 billion of cuts. That's what the president is proposing. That's not leadership. That's fantasy land. We can get rid of all the corporate jets. We can tax all the millionaires in the world. It's not going to solve the problem. We got to solve the problems. And I think that's what the president is showing right now. You're right, Steve. He's got a problem. He needs a deal. All right, so let's see how realistic he can get. I think that's the reason why John Boehner just walked away the other day. It was like, all he wants to do is raise taxes and continue spending. So to some extent, maybe the McConnell situation is a pretty good idea. Let's see the plan, Mr. President. Let's see your cuts. I think the Republicans would like a deal. Spending is what we need to talk about, but whether or not it'll happen, is up to the president.
All right, Margie, how do you see this playing out as we get closer to August 2nd?
I think it's funny saying that Republicans want a deal. I mean, I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing people walk out. Nothing's passing the House, Cantor says. People are fighting. I mean, it just seems, and we're not talking about raising the tax rate on average Americans. We're talking about closing loopholes for the very, very wealthy, which is what the American people want and what they thought they were electing people to do, and it turns out that Republicans want to do the exact opposite of what the people want to do. I see the president wanting to continue coming to the table as he has been, and Republicans, hopefully this McConnell deal, they'll be able to get enough Republicans and enough Democrats to
Jim, you get last word, and then we'll talk elections.
Okay. So, Margie, what's his plan?
Well, his plan, he's introduced a couple plans, and one of them is a grand deal to come to the table and talk about Social Security cuts and Medicare cuts, as well as closing some of these corporate tax loopholes.
Jim, I gave you last word, and then you ask a question.
And not changing, throwing out the entire government.
That's all nice words and platitudes, but what's the plan?
You know, this is a Republican talking point
that
they want to see President Obama with a quill in his hand. Otherwise, he's not doing anything. He's just sitting around doing nothing.
I want to see specifics.
It's ridiculous.
Jim is channeling Mitch McConnell right now, trying to get that plan in writing. Margie, you don't have to write out that plan. That part is not your job. All right, listen, let's talk about 2012 right now. As we move closer and closer, Republicans now, we heard Ron Paul is going to be focusing on the presidential race right now. Has some work to do, though. At the same time, you know, we have heard more and more from Michelle Bachmann in the news this week, but she's still polling well. When you look at Real Clear Politics, she's a strong number 2 right now to Mitt Romney. Latest developments here, what do you see happening?
Well, the biggest buzz right now is Rick Perry and whether the governor of Texas actually decides to get in.
He's polling number 3 right now, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's right. But, you know, he really hasn't decided whether he's going to run or not. It certainly looks that way. He's making all the right calls. He's calling all the leaders in New Hampshire and in all the early primary and caucus states. And if he gets in, then I think it changes a different dynamic into this whole race. So we'll see what happens. But the buzz right now out there is whether Rick Perry gets in. Michelle Bachmann is still holding her own in Iowa. And the rest of them are kind of sitting on the sidelines watching.
Does it matter to Democrats who it is?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Jim said, aside from there's one point, which is this is the first time in 40 years there hasn't been a clear Republican frontrunner. And so that's why you see a lot of folks like Governor Perry and so on sitting on the sidelines trying to figure out, should they get in, should they not, can they put together the structure? It's not just about polling well nationwide. It's about, or even in any one state, it's about putting together a real national infrastructure, which is a whole separate issue. And Ron Paul did the right thing to focus on his presidential race. Michelle Bachmann is getting excitement because she's exciting relative to some of these other folks who are not. But I think ultimately we're talking about a very weak field. It's not getting the support of primary voters who say that they are dissatisfied with the field. They're not getting the support of Republican establishment who are not turning on real substantial donor funds to them. And I think they're not going to get the support of general election voters because most of them are very far to the right.
Well, but I think it is exciting because, I mean, Margie's right. It's nice that we have an open field. You know, a lot of times in the Republican Party, it's sort of whose turn is it next.
Right.
And so I think this is going to be a good thing. And whomever the nominee is.
What's that? Silver lining.
Hey, that's politics.
Yeah, but I tell you what, we'll see what happens in November.
All right, we'll leave it there for now, and we'll see maybe by this time next week if we have any movement in the debt ceiling talks, and we'll talk again. Margie, thanks.
Thanks.
Good to see you. Jim, always a pleasure. See you again next week. Allison, back to you.